Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop, and today we're going to be talking about measuring because what we do is very different from what used to be done. Okay, picture this for a minute. You're a settler in a covered wagon heading out west. You're going to go out and build a log cabin somewhere along a stream and create a whole family. But you're going to need to make a whole bunch of things because you can't fit a house in your covered wagon. But tape measures haven't been invented yet, so how are you going to figure out how big to make it? Well, that's easy. You measure by the foot. No, quite literally, people would step it off. Your foot is a relatively close measure for what you need to come out with. And if you're building something for yourself in your shop, who cares if your foot is the same size as his foot? They just need to be the same as your own. But the foot's a little bit squishy. What if I had something a little more solid? I have a stick. I'm going to use this stick to measure everything. It is 7 sticks long, and it's 7 sticks and a half, 7 sticks and a third. And you can break everything down into a stick. And if all you're doing is making stuff in your shop, you don't need standard measurements. But using a stick to measure out a house is a bit time consuming. I want something that's a little bit simpler. Let me introduce to you the Traveler. This is a wheel, and this wheel has a standard dimension. This one happens to be 2 foot to the circumference. So this goes all the way around, and you've measured 2 feet. This one even has an arrow, so I can go a certain amount of the wheel around and get a very accurate measurement. But a lot of travelers were made by settlers who were out in the field, and they didn't have a standard circumference. They were just a wheel. I cut a wheel, I put a hole through it, I put a handle on it, and now I can measure out my fence line. I can measure out my house, and I can measure out barrels and logs and other things like that, because now I have something that is standard to me. Another thing you saw in almost every toolbox was the pinch rod. This is a simple thing with 2 rods that connect together, usually with blocks or something else, and you extend it to the length you want in total, and then you pinch it. In this case, you put a little screw down. It's very fancy, but that now locks this down into that these 2 rods now have a distance from point to point. Furniture makers would usually have several sets of pinch sticks. And what you could do with these is you could measure inside diameters, or you could take it over and measure a table base and mark it off on the table top. And you can transfer measurements very quickly and very accurately because you have a stick that is a set length. It's not longer or shorter, it is that measurement. A lot of shops that made the same thing over and over again would make what are called story sticks. And these would have markings along them so that you would know that from here to here was the distance to the bottom of the chest, from there to there is the bottom shelf, and so on all the way up your stick. You would actually have markings that would tell you what each of those are. And you could use this same stick to make that same dresser over and over and over again because all of the pertinent measurements are right here. But that leaves us to a serious problem. If I want to make this dresser, I take my stick. But what if I want to tell you how to make my dresser? Well, you can come over and you can match your stick up to mine and put the measurements exactly on it and go make it. But what if that person is on the other side of the country? Well, I need to tell them that their stick has markings that are here, here, and here. But what are those? I need something that is the exact same here as it is there. And my foot won't work because my foot is different from your foot. Ooh, the barley corn. Interestingly enough, the barley corn is actually very accurate. They grow to be almost exactly the same length no matter where you are. Barley corns are about the right size. And that's actually the measurement we use for measuring shoe size, at least in the US, is barley corns. Yes, barley corns. That's still the standard measurement. But along comes a thing called the Industrial Revolution, and people are making things in one place that have to fit into a specific thing in another place, and we need those to be very accurate. We can no longer use the king's foot, or the barley corn is actually still a little bit too wiggly for that. We need something that is standardized. So most countries came up with their own standard system. And so now we can standardize our travelers. This was made in a factory that had a stick that came from a stick that came from a stick that came from the stick in Washington, D.C. And for most things, that's pretty darn accurate. But travelers and rulers and simple sticks with marks on them are only so transportable. I really can't carry around a whole bunch of sticks with me. It take up a lot of space. And even this traveler, which can measure a lot, it still takes up a decent amount of space. And if I want a bigger one, it's going to take up even more space. I want something that just fits in my pocket that has all of the standard measurements, but my pocket isn't that big. If I want a stick like that in my pocket, well, then I'm going to have to fold the stick up. And now it'll fit in my pocket. And with this, I've got all of the measurements on there. If you go to Germany and a lot of European countries, you'll even find zigzag rules that are still regularly used and made that will fold up and stick in your pocket. And they might be 1 meter or 2 meters long, depending upon how much folded wood you want in your pocket. But still, that's just too much. It takes up a lot of space. I want something more compact that will measure much longer, not just 3 feet or 6 feet. I want something that'll go 10 feet and fit in my pocket. A company called Ferrand stepped up and said, hey, look at this. I can do that for you. This will do the same thing. You squeeze the levers and this extends out, and I can now measure things that are much, much longer. In this case, up to 8 feet with 1 stick. And it all fits inside this tiny little package that you can stick in your pocket. It's kind of an ingenious little device that when you squeeze these, it releases the pressure and allows the measure to slide out. And you can control how fast or slow it slides out. You have to push it back in though. But you can see it all fits down inside this one easy to carry piece. The Ferrand Rapid Rule. Ferrand made a killing off of this thing. It was wildly popular, but the problem with it is they had a very strong patent on this, and so no one else was able to make the Ferrand Rapid Rule. A company called Lufkin, though, came up and said, you know what? That's just too much. You see, this thing has an outside case, it has 2 arms, it has a spring, it has a screw, it has a retainer. It's got all of this other piece, it has to be maintained and oiled. We can do this a lot easier. They said, let's put a donut on it. And there are 2 halves to this metal casing and then a rod that extends out. They also patented this little tip that goes on there. So now you can actually grab the edge of a board and measure out from or to the board. No, they hadn't figured out the little wiggle movement yet on the end of it. Theirs was actually riveted on there hard. And it comes out very easily, but you have to push it in, and it takes a good bit of effort not to kink and wind it up. You also have to keep it oiled, which means that you tend to get oil on different surfaces, and it can be a little bit annoying, but it's very easy to fit in the pocket and is a really nice, simple tape measure, the Lufkin Donut. Soon after, Stanley Rule and Level came out with one that actually put a spring on the inside that made it so it auto rewound. No, this wasn't one of them, and I actually don't have one of those. I would love to get my hands on one, but it made it very easy because then you can lock it to a distance, you can loosen it, and it pulls itself back in. From that point on, we have the standard tape measure, which then other people start putting on other things. But now you can't go into a shop without seeing a tape measure somewhere with standard measurements. But now that we've got these, we have no use for these, right? Well, honestly, no. These can be more accurate than this. Because with a tape measure, what you are doing is you are measuring to a line. And that line is a thickness. But you're going to measure to the closest line on your tape measure. And then you're going to take it over and you're going to repeat the process. And so whatever variance you give yourself on that line, you're actually doubling the thickness of whatever that is. And that now becomes your margin of error. Whereas with a stick, I set this up to be dead stop to dead stop. And I take this over and I set that on there and it's still dead stop to dead stop. And I can get incredibly accurate with this. And a stick of this nature with that long, I can get within 1/1000th or less. And when you really get down to the most detailed measuring that is done anywhere in the world, it is done by relational measuring. Not by how much it is to a standard measurement, but what is the relationship between A and B. And that is the measurement as opposed to feet, inches, meters, and centimeters. That doesn't mean I don't pull out tape measures, because most of the time when I'm doing woodworking, I don't need that level of accuracy, and the accuracy I'm going to get from one of these is well within the range of what I need for woodworking. And there's a reason why I have dozens of these all over my shop, and I had to spend 20 minutes looking to find this one for the video. So personally, I find the history of measuring to be a very fascinating topic, and there were lots of things I jumped over and lots of other standards, and very interesting topic I would love to go deeper into at some point. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting one, because as fancy as we get, there are times when it's actually best to go back to what was used thousands of years ago, because it's honestly incredibly accurate. So I hope you like it. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, snide remarks, throw those in the comments down below. Whew. Like, comment, share, subscribe, because that does help out the channel, and thank you for being a patron and one of these people over on the side. I'm glad I can say that, so thank you for that. No, honestly, it really does help out the channel. Patrons are the lifeblood of this channel. What we make here on YouTube is a tiny portion of what we actually get. So thank you for all of our patrons. You are the ones who support this channel. And I don't run ads in the middle saying, you know, this is sponsored by such and such mattress. Thank you. That's due to those people over there. And if you'd like to join them, think about becoming a patron on Patreon. We do special things regularly for patrons and give out shirts and other things like that. And if you'd like to join that, well, you know what to do. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. And that's how I know if I have measured up. Oh, check it out. That thing totally rules. I know. The joke at the end is always a bit of a slapstick.